This painting forced me to rethink how I approach large-scale oil portraits. Welcome to my studio. So for this painting, I wanted to be a little bit ambitious. It's normally quite easy to do oil paintings on a smaller scale. However, if you increase the canvas size, things can get a little bit tricky. So I knew I'd need a lot of paint for this project, and I wanted to focus mainly on using reds and blues and having kind of like purple as an in-between tone. For most paintings, I try to use around 2 to 3 brushes, but because this work is on a much larger scale, I knew I'd have to use more. So I started this piece by applying a light wash of pink over the canvas, and this just helps the oil paint apply a little bit better. I don't normally work at this scale, so the biggest challenge isn't the detail, it's actually just applying the paint uniformly across the canvas, because you've got a lot of area to work with. Everything behaves a little bit differently when the canvas gets bigger. If you make a small mistake in this early stage, it kind of just compounds later as you get more into the painting. One of the first things I learned is that scale amplifies everything, so especially with proportions. On a smaller canvas, you can kind of get away with slight inaccuracies and can cover them up quite quickly. But at this size, if the eyes are even slightly off or the hat crooked, the whole face just feels a bit wrong. Another thing I learned was to approach the painting in segments. So instead of attacking everything at once, I focused on the face, then the hands, then the clothing. This just makes it easier because on a large scale, it's hard to get paint across the canvas as quickly. Working in oils tends to slow things down, and when you're dealing with a big painting, that's even more the case. So I had to wait, lay gradually, and avoid overworking areas. One of the hardest challenges I faced with this painting was probably the background. It ended up being just as important as the face, because it controls how the viewer's eye is drawn towards the painting. I had to keep the background soft and controlled, so it didn't compete with the features. The background colour also dictated how the skin tones looked, so I had to balance them together. The more I added to the background, the worse the portrait looked. So simplifying it was probably key to keeping everything in the composition balanced. At the end of every painting, I come back and work on all the small details. And I used to think this was the most important part of any piece. But in the end, this painting taught me that working on a larger scale isn't about doing more. It's about seeing the broader picture and being a lot more deliberate with every decision that's made along the way.